Hello and welcome to episode 298 of the Crate and Crowbar, a PC gaming podcast. It's being recorded on the 10th of October 2019. I'm Marsh Davis and I'm joined by Tom.
Senior.
That's the noise that he makes. And Tom.
Francis.
That's the noise he makes.
Ah.
2 Toms, 1 Marsh. Which is an unheimlich image to introduce this.
We're coming up on our 300th episode. It feels like we should do something special.
Yeah, we won't though, will we?
Nah. Nah.
I did see if Graham was going to be available for it, but unfortunately he can't make it.
That's a nice thought.
Yeah.
That's an anti-announcement for you there. There'll be no special appearance.
Get excited, guys. Nothing special is going to happen in 2 weeks' time. But something special is going to happen now. Because we're going to discuss PC gaming news.
It's been a lot of big news this week.
Has there?
Well, the New York Times has written about it. It's kind of penetrated the mainstream media. And this is the story of the Hearthstone pro who, I think he made a statement about Free Hong Kong, on a stream. I think his winnings were taken away. He's been suspended for a year from competition. And, this has caused a lot of, sadness on the internet.
Even the people interviewing him were fired.
Really?
People who just were there, hosting the thing were fired just for being close to this thing that happened.
Yeah.
Were they meant to intervene and stop it or something? What were they
supposed to do?
I don't know.
For context, I think about a 40% stake of Blizzard is owned by Tencent, which is a Chinese publisher. If you're going to access the Chinese market, you have to go through a Chinese publisher. Tencent's, I believe, the biggest. Tencent owns a stake in loads of games companies, actually, ones that you wouldn't even expect. I think they've got 5% of Paradox, for example. But Blizzard's objectives are very entwined with accessing the Chinese market and making sure their online games are able, like World of Warcraft, are able to be published there. And obviously Hong Kong is an extremely sensitive issue for the Chinese government at the moment, and Tencent, it's thought, it has strong ties to the Chinese government, and join the dots. It's kind of quite clear what's happened. It's easy to get into kind of conspiratorial thinking about this sometimes, where you might think, a certain company owns 5% share, so they might be calling the shots. But in this instance, I think it's just quite obvious that Blizzard has caved into some sort of pressure.
It might not even be pressure. It might just be
fear. Pressure.
If you know how the Chinese government reacts to things and you want to continue operating in China, you just immediately do whatever you
just preemptively shut it down and stop perceived problem before it even happens. And
although the firing of the interviewers as well, that feels so much like a oppressive regime move. It almost, I don't know if this is weird speculation, but I feel like if I was someone terrified of an oppressive government and I thought someone had said something in an interview that they would absolutely hate and I had these big action against that person, I wouldn't even think to fire the interviewers. It wouldn't occur to me. That's so excessive and so, unfair, that it almost feels like that does feel like the action of a government themselves.
It's like everyone is tainted by this incident that a line has been crossed, and everyone, even in the room, has to be admonished for it. So it's important to mention this was obviously quite a high level Blizzard decision, and Blizzard employees are very distressed about it as well. I think they covered up some of the slogans outside of Blizzard headquarters.
Yeah, there's think globally and every voice matters.
Yes.
Someone covered those. Those are embossed, what's the word? Engraved in metal around this massive statue in the Blizzard campus, and they were covered up with paper.
So it's obviously a lot of people understandably upset about it.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few valedictory tweets from people who were originally upset that there was going to be a Diablo phone game made. And they're now reclaiming that argument as a sort of, see, we told you China was bad news.
Oh, God.
I'm not sure that was really your argument.
No. It's an interesting story because there's a suite of stories around this, which is why places like the New York Times will cover this. And Huawei, the phone company, is just an obvious example from the last few years. But also recently the NBA has had a spat with Chinese interests as well. And the corporate world's approach to these matters is an ongoing story in our world and the mainstream media's world, which is quite an interesting, rare crossover.
It's pretty amazing to see two, I want to say senators, but I wouldn't know if they're congressmen or whatever, in the US, one Republican and one Democrat both speaking out about this, about the Blizzard thing specifically, which is, it's pretty rare that, the game industry drama of the day gets the attention of US politicians, and then B, on both sides of the aisle, coming out against it.
But,
Sorry, how are you dealing with it on PC Gamer? Are you appending articles with information about this? Are you going to boycott Blizzard's games?
No, well, obviously not going to boycott their games. Very carefully is the answer. We haven't been sued yet, and so we're just carefully reporting on things that we actually know rather than things that, people speculate about online. But it's actually fascinating. We've got our reporter Stephen Messner, who has done loads of stuff on China and is fascinated by the Chinese gaming market and the interesting pressures on it. There have been smaller stories, like, for example, I think, Ubisoft they wanted to change some, Rainbow Six Siege decals and things like that to fall in line with, what would be allowed in China. And there was a backlash from, Western players who saw that as kind of encroachment, cultural encroachment almost, and took offense to it.
What kinds of things were being
I can't remember specifics. I'd have to go and look at the story, but I mean, there are certain kind of, like cultural symbols that aren't allowed in China, and there's some kind of violent depictions of things that aren't allowed as well.
Oh, right. I thought you meant when you said decals, my mind went to like bullet holes and things like that that are painted on the scenery. No, you mean like spray paint, like sort of like emblems, right?
Yeah, right. So, nothing like that would change the fundamental way the game works or anything like that, but symbolic stuff that censors in China might be interested in changing. And in the end, I think Ubisoft decided to have 2 tracks of the game, one that was just standard for what everyone expects, and a different one for China, which is how most developers approach it. But it's a fascinating story, and it comes from other media as well, like Hollywood or just the big cinema blockbusters have been, creating films for Chinese audiences for ages.
Yeah.
And, just adapting the material to make it more understandable to Chinese audiences, because it's just such an enormous market. And it's just a fascinating interaction between culture and business and how those pressures interact, like how capitalism interacts with cultural messaging and that kind of stuff. And that's in our world now, so we get to talk about it. Fun.
Yeah. I feel deeply unqualified to do so.
Same. Yeah, same to be honest, which is scary.
As a developer, I'm handling the sensitive situation by already being too lazy to localize my games into any languages. Just not.
Do you not localize at all?
No.
Wow. That seems to have worked out okay.
Problem preemptively solved. Yeah, I don't know what to say about it really, because it's just so obvious that what Blizzard has done here, and they've come under, I think, more pressure and backlash than I would have actually expected publicly from senators as well as players. And BlizzCon is coming up, and that's going to be very interesting to watch that and see how players organize or heckle or respond, or what the atmosphere is going to be like, what Blizzard is going to do to address this, if at all. So yeah, it's a developing story. And we'll be talking about it for the next few months, I think.
Do you want to weigh in on another workplace fiasco that we're completely unqualified to talk about?
I'd love to, Marsh.
So Us2 Games, recently parted ways with one of its, developers, and there was a story doing the rounds, seemingly part authored or informed by the union that the, employee belongs to, or was trying to belong to, suggesting that he had been fired specifically for setting up a union or getting involved in union activities.
Because he's actually one of the founding members of the Games Workers Unite, collective.
But, Us2 Games have said that's not the case, and he was fired for other reasons, which will remain private. So there.
And that's accountability, everybody. Transparent operations.
They gave, the Games Workers Unite, they are, sort of operating as part of, a larger union organization in the UK, whose name I don't have to hand. But, they gave Us2 a sort of ultimatum of reinstate this guy by X date or we'll, start legal proceedings. And they didn't reinstate the guy. And so they have now started the legal proceedings. They filed a workplace tribunal case. There's sort of a government system for this, and the reason that they have said publicly, Games Workers Unite have, that the reason they did this publicly and the reason that they put pressure on to reinstate this guy before doing any legal proceedings was that now they've started this process, it'll take 25 days for this thing to be processed. And then after it's been processed, they'll then tell Us2 Games, and then Us2 Games have 28 days to decide about it. And this guy is in the UK on a visa, that is dependent on his job. And without the job, he's probably going to be sent home unless he can find some other work or some other solution there.
He has a family here as well, right? I mean, he's brought his family over, I think.
And so, Game Workers Unite are saying that they fear that Us2 will just wait it out and just do nothing for as long as possible, because they don't have to. And by the time if he is, deported or, goes home of his own volition because the visa isn't going to work out, that makes it much harder to make a case.
It did seem like in the article, either the journalist or the union or the employee had got hold of what would seem to be like private emails between HR and seniors at the company, essentially saying that they were irritated by his agitating, which they felt wasn't always, he was sort of speaking on the behalf of other people more than he should, to advocate for sort of progressive things. And they expressed some irritation at that. I don't know whether that was the reason he was fired. I mean, obviously us two disagree with that, but I find it, there's no way you can adjudicate on it, but I think the thing that feels quite familiar to me about this is us two's response. In us two's defense, they do say they have other employees who are members of unions, and they obviously have not fired them, so there's no problem with being a member of a union. That obviously wasn't the cause. But there's something about being a very small company and having quite an informal relationship with your employees, and then thinking that flat structure actually genuinely persists when you begin to scale up, and when the founders are super wealthy and the employees super aren't wealthy. Other employees of us too have come out and said that it's a great company to work for and they really take care of their staff, and this has been distorted. But it's just the way that us two describe themselves as a fampany. I can't even say it. Because obviously there's a portmanteau of family and company. That just doesn't, it never works. Like when you get to a certain size and level of success, there are power dynamics at play which prevent really any kind of flat hierarchy. I just never buy that.
Yeah. So I think last month I went to Bordeaux to visit Motion Twin, who created Dead Cells.
Oh, yeah.
And they are a profit share company. Everyone in the business takes an equal share of the profits they make. Sort of, it's kind of an unusual French arrangement in French law that you can establish these kind of cooperative companies, in a different way that you probably couldn't in Britain. But what they've done is they've brought a bunch of new people in. They're still a small studio, about like 25 people, something like that. But the kind of old guard have created our Motion Twin, and they are prototyping for the next project. And then the new people are working on Dead Cells updates. And what happens is it's a flat structure. Everyone's allowed to go up and give comments on anything. So an artist can comment on a piece of design and vice versa. But there's still you can't escape the hierarchy of seniority of an older founder just has the cachet that makes that they have power. You just innately have more power than other people in the country. Like a junior person coming up to challenge them about something, as much as anyone can say, oh no, it's all like equitable and it's all, it's all just ideas. The reality of human interaction doesn't work like that. Like, I'm not saying at all that there's an abuse of power in those contexts, but you have to recognize the hierarchy in some way. Yeah. And this is why official HR departments are good sometimes, because a third party to adjudicate is necessary. And these, especially small companies lack that. There isn't a third party they can go to because everyone is directly reporting to everybody else, which is problematic.
Yeah. It seems like it's a noble goal and a good thing to aim for a structure where those power dynamics are minimized as much as you can and aren't sort of formally encoded into your structure. But it would be dangerous to assume that that's fixed now and we're flat and everyone's equal. Because if there is a power dynamic, and as you say, I think there always will be with seniority and that kind of thing, then it's much worse to not acknowledge it and pretend it's not there.
It's much better to have a formalized power structure. In fact, when I was at Mojang, we were going through this exact sort of same growth period where the company was scaling up from being what was quite an informal indie structure to one that was interfacing with Microsoft, which is a very, very hierarchical structure. And it was chaotic for a long period of time because nobody knew whether they were the person to take responsibility for stuff. Responsibility was generally diffuse anyway. Job titles weren't very meaningful. And you really, in the end, I think, it did restructure itself. So there was quite a clear hierarchy, but it was reluctantly and too slowly embraced, I would think. But, it's, I don't know how it is at Us Two Games. Maybe it's a perfect company.
Maybe they exist.
Do you get any sense from Motion Twin, how could someone get fired? Because I'm thinking, if you're a new employee, one of the things that probably goes through your head if someone in a senior position says something you completely disagree with, and a little conversation happens in your head of ooh, I think I should say something. But should I? They're a lot more senior than me. And then ultimately, the sort of extreme case of that is could I get fired for just being a huge pain in the ass?
So, that's a very good question. And the reason I can't answer it is because I'm not aware of the precise employee protections in place in France. I gather they're quite strong.
Yeah.
So I don't think you could, but there's also there's a lot of very technical problems with the flat, profit sharing structure, because every time you expand, you dilute the pool, because someone has to buy shares in the company basically. And they've had to, I think, cap the price of their shares. So the shares aren't so high they can't hire anyone. So like, we can hire you if you can pay thousands of pounds for this. So they've had to cap the price of the shares. So it doesn't interface well with typical capitalist markets like that structure. It just seems to have these really thorny problems, and they struggle to expand. Which is probably good, because as Marsh says, like if they were to expand to 50, 100 people, that flat structure would, I think, you'd start to see the cracks in that, and you'd start to get loads of problems. And I often wonder about Valve as well, and I think there are about 200 people or something like that in Seattle. How and what real power dynamics actually, exist in that studio.
Yeah, that's thinking about the sort of like who can fire me kind of thing. I assume if I joined Valve and then I like really personally pissed off Gabe Newell that I would get fired. I don't know who exactly would fire me and by what sort of the mechanisms would be.
Yeah, take a strong stance against knives.
Yeah, you rearrange his knife collection. It's all out of alphabetical.
I don't think you should be blunt in general.
I'm a spork man myself.
Yeah, I think that the phrase that I've heard them use is peer review, and that could mean fucking anything. So yeah, it's interesting. There are cliques in every workplace, but without formal structures to cut through them. I think there's some problems there potentially. But that was just speculation. What do I know? I live in a very hierarchical structure on PC Gamer. It's a military outfit. Phil Savage.
You're the top dog, right?
No. Phil directs me here, there, and everywhere. Make me tea.
Oh.
Says. No, it's not true. It's not how it works at all. Media's very relaxed.
What have you been playing, Tom?
So I've been playing Indivisible, which is from the developers of Skullgirls, which is a fighting game that gained a cult following. It's supposed to be quite a legit fighting game. I've not played it.
Indivisible or Indivisible.
Indivisible. And this is a kind of Metroidvania structure, and it's got like platforming and, but combat is the sort of thing where you bump into an enemy, then you go into, it zooms in, and, you're in a kind of real-time party combat system where each button corresponds to a member of your party, and you press them, to trigger their attacks, and you create combos that way, using the various different timings, what the characters can do. The party exists in your head. You meet people on the road and absorb them into your brain, and they are surprisingly cool with that. And then whenever you're in combat, they pop out like Pokemon, and you can use them to hit stuff. Looks great. It's all like loads of hand-drawn animation for the sprites. Loads of kind of really cool, unusual design for the characters and your kind of party. And it's in a really beautiful, you're 2D sprites on a 3D environment, and it's just beautifully art directed. It's really colourful and sumptuous, and the colour palette just changes as you go to different areas. It's a very average kind of Metroidvania. It's really basic stuff. It's like you find an axe and then, you chop through trees. And the levels aren't designed like in a very interesting way, in a way that, there aren't secrets and sort of corridors and strange things you could discover. Like, there's a really good one like Axiom Verge is like that. There's a real thrill to getting around the place. It's not really like that. It feels more like Ori and the Blind Forest, in that you're just dashing and wall jumping and getting around the place. But the writing is horrible.
Oh no.
I had to stop playing because it was just, I just couldn't take it anymore. It was,
What kind of horrible?
Oh boy. Okay. So the very first, so spoilers for Indivisible coming up for the first 10 minutes of the game, and it only takes 10 minutes barely to get through this, by the way. So you go up to a training ground and you meet your dad, and you just have an absolutely absurd conversation with him where he's trying to train you and he sort of punches you a few times and you're like, I'm annoyed by that. There's something that your main character says. It's so painful.
Do they say Fampany?
They don't say Fampany. It doesn't quite go that bad. He tells her to calm down, and she says something like, "No, I'm calming the hell up."
Oh my god! What does that mean?
I know.
Your nose
does she
is
mean
just
she's getting
bleeding at
calmer or
this
less
point.
calm?
Yeah, but I'm just going into tremors and spasms. It's like, what is language anymore? And there's loads of examples of just absolutely bizarre, painful lines in it. So her dad, after the argument, she starts talking about like her mum's axe. And what? And then it turns out her mum's dead, and she's like, "Tell me about her axe." And he's like, "No." And then he slides with no animation off the screen. And she's like, "Oh, I suppose I should go apologise." And so you do some platforming for about 20 seconds down to your village, which is a of course has been set on fire by the villain of the piece. It's the most fucking...
Oh, so it's an RPG.
It's the same fucking sequence. And your dad's dead. And she's just like completely indifferent. It's just...
Well, that's because she's calmed the hell up, Tom.
She's calmed the hell up.
I mean, they foreshadowed that really, really efficiently.
This is like 12 seconds apart, this argument of him being dead. It's like you've only just met the dad character and suddenly he's lying on the floor and she's sort of sad about it, but not in any convincing way. And then she has an absurd fight and face off with the villain who's burned the place down. And the villain gets sucked into her brain. And then she comes out in the fight and she looks at her dad as she's lying dead on the floor in the middle of this burning village. And she says, well, I suppose I better bury dad.
Oh my God.
And then it's just utterly like, it's psychopathic. It's just the lack of care for her entire childhood village is burned down. And
is it meant to go for like flippant sort of, humor, like the too cool for school kind of thing?
Not self-aware. So later on, like, I think they've gone for a light-hearted bantery tone, so the characters in your head will sort of banter with you and come up and, that stuff kind of works really, that's fine. But don't open the game with your family dying and having a dead mother and having all your childhood village burned down and have your character not react at all to that in any convincing way. Because like, who the fuck am I controlling? Like, does anything matter in this world if my fucking family and village doesn't matter? And then it's just so annoying because it's beautiful. Like, loads of effort's gone into it and it's interesting. Like, the combat system is really interesting. The idea you've got loads of Pokemon in your head that you can kind of rearrange and put into your party. The animation's really cool. And then, but almost every other interaction is just excruciating and soulless and weird. The voice actors they do quite a good job, to be honest. Like, they have to work so hard with the material. And I think they realise it's supposed to be sort of light-hearted, bantery script. But I just wish that they hadn't put a story in the game. Just wish they hadn't. If it had started and you're just going from left to right through the world, I'd still be playing it. Genuinely. The fact that they open with this, like, has just made me so angry. And also, they keep on doing dialogue sequences that are terrible and get in the way of all the fun. And I can't engage with any of the systems because I'm just like, I've got to listen to some fresh bullshit from this carrot man. And what does he want? He wants me to pull up healing plants and collect 6 of them. But it's just written so awkwardly, like a human would never say it.
How fast can you skip through this dialogue stuff?
So some of it is, like, it's a mix of, like, pre-baked videos that you can skip by holding down the B button. A bunch of it you can skip through, by just tapping B through conversations and stuff. Occasionally you can't for, I imagine, loading reasons or something. So you could, but I don't think that's good enough. I think if you're going to put all of this front-loaded information and exposition and dialogue, just has to be palatable. Otherwise you're hiding the best parts of the game behind a barrier that you have to click through.
Yeah.
Which is really disappointing. It's actually, I was really looking forward to it because the art style was really spectacular.
Yeah, I've been following it for ages. And I think I read the Steam reviews when it came out and it's, I think it's had not like I think it's like mostly positive reception.
About 7 out of 10. Yeah, from what I was looking at earlier.
But a lot of the reviews mentioned writing. And also, it just sort of, from what all their comments, it kind of didn't sound like my kind of game. And so I'm probably not going to play it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does look absolutely gorgeous. I didn't realize it was the Skullgirls people.
I think it is, yeah.
It makes sense though, because that game is also really impressive visually.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a shame. And it made me realize I cared more about game stories than I thought I did. Because normally I quite happily breeze through them, unless it's just an absolute stinking time, in which case it just puts me off the whole world, the whole thing. It's like, well, I don't know, it just undermines it all for me. Don't like it.
There were a couple of other things I noticed. One is they did a pre-order bonus where if you pre-order, you get like you get an in-game companion that follows you around, like a pet that follows you around in-game.
Was that a dog?
Unusual. Yeah, I don't know what the actual creature was. And the other thing is that it's £32.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's quite a lot.
Is it? Do you get the sense it's like a really big game?
It's hard to tell. I don't think the combat system is as deep as it seems initially. You can collect a lot of characters, but so far I haven't encountered like leveling up screens or skill screens or anything that would suggest there's going to be like an evolving sense of power arc to your party in the game. No skills to unlock and stuff like that. You just get them and they have a preset number of striking attacks. So it doesn't feel like a hugely long one. No, 32 seems a lot to me, especially when it's not the same game, but you could just buy Ori and the Blind Forest, which just looks even more beautiful and is actually a really challenging platformer combat game as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's always just starting a downer, everybody. Yeah. But
Ori and the Blind Forest has a sort of a bit of a low blow at the beginning, but it actually lands it.
It does.
Yeah.
It absolutely lands it. Yeah. It's like, I'm so invested in these squirrels and their pain.
And with no words, right? It's
it's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, that's good storytelling.
Kind of the opposite, like maximum impact, minimum words.
Yeah, minimum time wasting, and immediately just brings you into the atmosphere of the world. There's a darkness underneath the beautiful pixely, kind of pixie lights and things. Shame.
Yeah. Sounds like you need to calm the hell up, Tom.
I need to calm the fuck up. Who else? Who's been playing the happiest game of you two, I think?
This game. I've been enjoying Borderlands 3 a lot.
Oh. That's jokes and bad writing, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So, have you played it?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
I've been liking the writing mostly.
Okay.
I got, so I reviewed Borderlands 2, so I know that game fairly well as well. I played all of them. And I remember Borderlands 2 being pretty hit and miss with the writing. Like there were some good jokes and some really like, kind of wincing jokes. I haven't had as many of the wincing jokes in this one. And I've had plenty of just laugh out loud ones. I was surprised how much I like it actually. I was, I think this is one of those things where I haven't heard this opinion, but I've heard people reacting to the opinion that they didn't like the writing in Borderlands 3. And I don't know, because I didn't see the opinions themselves, I don't know if this is coming from long-term Borderlands fans or people who've always hated it or what. So I kind of went through it half braced for like, am I gonna find this really cringy? And also there's kind of the status of Gearbox and how I feel about them as a company has changed a fair bit since Borderlands 2.
Right.
In that, like, there have been so many stories about Randy Pitchford that I don't know I don't have any inside information about any of them, and I don't know that the, absolute truth of any of them. But at this point, it's kind of like, there's gotta be something wrong there.
I mean, he was once a professional magician. I mean, if that's not like the ultimate indictment against somebody's person, I don't know.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds like they treated some of their employees really badly, and, they've also made some bizarre decisions and released some terrible games. And so, that's partly why I'm so surprised that I like it. And also it's just, so apparently there were a lot of technical issues on launch. I didn't, hit any of those. I'm playing, a fair bit after launch, and I'm playing on PS4 Pro, so I haven't had any performance issues. There've been a few things like textures just been blurry for too long. Which is, I mean, it doesn't bother me, but it is a bit dumb that that's an issue on a PS4 Pro in a game that mostly looks like Borderlands 2 did. How many years ago? 5, 6, 8? Like a long time ago. Yeah. Long enough that like there shouldn't really be any conceivable reason that this game doesn't run perfectly on modern hardware. But other than that, it's like, it's a really well-made, really like lavish game. They really just went fucking all out on it in terms of, okay, you know, by the point of Borderlands 2, they figured out this game works and people like it. I don't think I realized how huge it was until Borderlands 3 came out and they started talking about figures of like, you know, Borderlands 2, I think it was something weird like Borderlands 2 has sold like more in the last 3 years than it did at launch or whatever. But the franchise now is just absolutely vast. And also I'm discovering I have a lot of friends who are really, really into it. It feels like they kind of got the confidence to just like, okay, we know people like this form of game. We can afford to just make a shitload of it now. And so, I think I'm right saying there's 4 classes this time when there was only 3 before. And then one of the big differences is that, in Borderlands 2, every class just had 1 ability. So if you're 0, you get to go invisible. And if you're the Siren, you get to levitate somebody. And I can't remember what the other class.
The Raven that used to go through people's brains and then come back to you.
Oh yeah.
Might have dreamt that.
Were there only 3 classes or was there another one?
I'm sure there was like the Gunzerker who can.
Oh yeah, okay. So maybe it was 4 last time as well.
Yeah. Why do I know that?
Yeah, you're right. And that's kind of, I remember that being a noticeable feature of it, like an unusual choice because it's a RPG in which you level up, 50 times or something through the course of it and you're spending all these on perks and stuff and you only really have 1 ability. And so all those perks just go super deep on what that ability does, how it interacts with other things and how you upgrade it and how it can, the final perk I got for 0 in Borderlands 2 was one where, if I melee someone from stealth, not only does it do a huge amount of damage, but if it kills them, it recloaks me. And so as long as I keep killing people, I can stay invisible forever, which is like, that was perfect. It was like, that's a very me skill. And then, it also feels like the sort of, the logical extreme of that class. It was already about stealthing and melee and stuff and, being able to go all the way with that was awesome. This time I'm playing as, Samara, I think, who is a siren again, but she's like a punchy siren, where,
What was the siren? Was that broadly like psychic?
The one who levitates, she casts like a bubble on somebody and they levitate in the air and they're trapped and you can shoot them and do extra damage to somebody's trapped.
Type ability.
Yeah, and Samara can do that, but that's one of her 3 choices for her action skill at the start. She could also do a thing where she just jumps up in the air and slams down and does damage to everyone around her, or another one where she creates like a line of damage in front of her. And then those 3 correspond to 3 skill trees that all have perks that aren't necessarily exclusively about them. In fact, they're well designed so that all of the perks in the like tree that relates to the line of fists ability, none of them are useless if you should decide to take a different action ability. So you can have I've actually ended up taking, at first I wanted like the ground slammy one. I didn't want to be a sort of long distance siren. I wanted to get up close and like do splash damage to everybody, and that was cool for a while. And then I eventually realized like actually the way this game is designed, there's quite a lot of situations where you have a lot of distance before you reach the enemy, and I want to be doing something for that. And so now when I was doing the ground slam thing, that has a long cooldown, and so I was specializing in minimizing that cooldown and getting perks that make that cooldown less, and finding other ways to reduce that cooldown. And now I've switched to the bubble thing because A, it has a shorter cooldown, B, I'm going for longer range stuff, C, I've just unlocked a perk in the ground slam tree. There's a perk that you unlock that means whatever your action skill is, it will also phase lock people around it, which is phase lock is the bubble thing. And so if you're doing the ground slam thing, you're phase locking people around the ground slam. If you're doing the line of fists, you phase lock people around that, but you can also just put that on the phase lock. And so now you phase lock people and it phase locks people around the person you phase lock. And phase lock has a really short cooldown, and I've specialized in reducing that cooldown. And so now I can just be phase locking people all the time, and it phase locks fucking everybody. And then a perk in a different tree, it's sort of, you have to invest like 10 points in this tree before you can choose this one. But once you do, choose this, and it just makes all of the augment skills in the whole game, significantly more effective. And the augment skills are, in my case, it's the one that phase locks people around the person you attacked. And there's other ones where like, it means that whatever your action skill is, it heals you, for an amount of the damage that you deal. And there might be another one that like, reduces your cooldown for how many people you hit or whatever. But you can only pick one of those, and you can switch them at any time. You also don't have to pay for these, which is really nice. So if you just get 10 points in this tree, you unlock the augment that phase locks people around you. And yeah, it's just been really cool building their class that way. And finding, when I looked at them at first, I thought, you're kind of like, because you have to invest 10 points in this tree to get this skill, that means that they're sort of pushing you to just pick one tree and stick with it for the whole game. And actually I've found almost the opposite, where it's most of the fun is in figuring out weird ways that a certain perk in this tree interacts with a skill from this other tree that is really cool. And that one that increases the effectiveness of all of your augment things, the phase lock augment, usually the ones who are phase lock because they're just near the target, if you shoot them at all, it cancels the phase lock. This just changes that so it's like half a second after you damage them, it cancels the phase lock. And that means you can actually just pump loads of damage into them in that half second, depending on what weapon you're using. And of course, like the thing that I'm remembering about Borderlands is that it's just a sort of a huge gun menu or gun,
yeah.
It's a gun shopping spree, really. Like it's this, you have this shopping cart and you're just pouring guns into it as you run through the world, just taking fucking everything. And then you spend like 15 minutes just looking through your inventory thinking, is that any good? Is that really any good? Did I pick that up to sell it, or is this actually a good thing? And I actually kind of wish that the interface for that was a bit better. Because they have detailed stats on these guns, and the idea is they vary in fire rate and damage and all this other stuff. But there's also, I keep finding there's a lot of hidden properties to these things. In some cases, like if there's like a legendary weapon, they tell you this up front. There are properties of these that we don't tell you in the stats. You have to try them out to find out. But even without those, even in the lower tier, I had an Atlas assault rifle that on paper didn't sound that great. It's sort of, its damage times its fire rate times its clip size was not competitive with the other guns that I had. But when I tried it in practice, it was incredible because it had 0 recoil. And so, and the scope, it had a scope, but like a reflex sight kind of thing, which I guess is not a scope. It's a sight. But basically you look down the sights and it zooms in a little bit, but not too much, which is kind of just right for most situations in this game where you want precision, but you don't actually want to be super zoomed in because then you lose situational awareness. And the fact that it had 0 kick meant just everybody, I'm playing on a console and there's a sort of auto aim that's just on by default, and it's really good auto aim. I really like it.
You mean it's accurate, or that it actually predicts what you want?
Yeah, both. It's, I think it does a certain amount of like sort of tracking. There's a certain amount of stickiness to it where you're of course all to kind of stay on someone's head if you're roughly tracking them. And I'm not very good at console shooters, so this is very much appreciated for me. I can definitely imagine some people finding it too much and you can turn it off. But anyway, with this particular gun, it just means you squeeze the trigger to zoom in, you're on their head, and then you just keep firing and you'll stay exactly on their head because there's no recoil and there's a little bit of tracking and it's not hard to track like a slow moving target. And so it's just insanely effective. It's just like guns that do twice as much total damage output were nothing like as effective as this, because this was just laser focused on everyone's weak spot, just mowing everybody down.
This all sounds like sort of OP the game. Like, what is the challenge in it? Is there none? Is it just gratifying to disassemble these people? You're
always leveling up and the enemies are always leveling up and your guns are not. And so any sufficiently powerful gun eventually becomes obsolete. And that's kind of the magic of it is, it can give you stuff that's just insanely good. And that's the fun of it. And it really is remarkable how that doesn't come through in the stats. Like I'll find stuff with amazing stats and I'll try and think, no, not really. That doesn't do it. And it's not anything like as good as this gun. And I don't know if this is an intentional, attempt to fix that, but everything now has a score. I don't know if that was in Borderlands 2, but like there'll just be an overall score for the weapon. It's a 300 weapon. It's a 200 weapon. And you can sort your inventory by that. So that's kind of, because it is difficult when it, like, a shotgun that does 30 times 8 damage, 5.6 times a second with a 12 round clip. How does that compare to a 12 by 10 shotgun that does 4.5 rounds per second that, only has a 6 round clip?
So they're not exactly like a DPS, just a DPS?
Nope. It does, with the things that do, like, spreads of shots, it won't even tell you what the total damage is for one shot because it'll just do like 30 times 8 or whatever, or 12 times 16. What it will do is if you compare two, it'll highlight it in red or green depending on whether it's higher or lower. So
okay, that's cool.
That's my trick with shotguns is you equip one shotgun and then
go for green.
Mouse over the other one and then, it'll tell you whether it's more damage. But given that, I don't really mind that. Like, I don't want them to just add more stats. They could add a kick stat and that would be somewhat interesting, but I'm already spending kind of too much time looking at these numbers and trying to multiply them together in my head. And sometimes I literally got out a calculator to figure out, like, is this thing better than this thing? But ultimately none of that really matters. You want to just try it, right? Like, and they sort of suggest you do that anyway. So I wish the interface for that was better. Like, I think what I really want is just, rather than, the way it works right now is you have like initially 2 slots for guns and then your inventory and you decide which guns from your inventory go in your actual slots and those are the ones you hot swap between with the button in game. What I really want is just like my entire inventory. I just choose what order it's in. And then in game, there's just a button that just says next gun, next gun, next gun, next gun. And I also really need like a training area or just like a place I can go where there'll always be this many enemies of my level and they'll just pour in and I just mow them down just so I can test guns. Cause that's what I need to do is I just need to know I have 8 fucking guns that don't fit into the slots I have. My slots are all full. I have 8 others that I also think might be valid. And I need to try all of them. And I can do that as I play the game, but the game is annoyingly full of varied and interesting challenges. And so I wipe out one group of enemies with this gun and it was great for that. And then I switch to another gun and the next group of enemies give me a load of trouble. I'm like, is that because these are different enemies with different abilities and strengths, or is this because this gun is garbage? And so I find myself like, I won't kill this enemy yet because he's the same as the last enemy. So I actually want to change weapons before I attack him. So I have a scientific comparison of these two, which is kind of ridiculous. It feels like a game could do more to support you there.
Yeah. If there was just a menu option that put you into a kind of VR world where there's not even a skybox, it's just like white space there where things charge you.
Yeah.
Then you just dip in and out of there and see what the guns feel like.
It is interesting. I always wonder if there's a reason they didn't do that, because I got stuck on a boss. One thing I really don't like about it is that, I ended up doing, I don't know if I skipped too many side quests in the first area. And so I ended up kind of underleveled for the main quest. And for like 3 or 4 sections of the main quest, I was still doing it fine. I was still perfectly able to defeat everything. But the thing that was happening was all the loot I found was, its minimum level was 2 levels above me. So I couldn't use any of the guns I'm finding. And that just kills the game. Like if you're finding stuff that you can't use and you can't even use it next level, sometimes I was finding stuff that's 3 levels above me. I was like, I can't use this for 3 levels. I'm just going to sell it. Like there's no point in me hanging on to this. So basically this is useless to me. All the stuff I'm finding is just crap. And really, like I'm doing content that's should be too hard for me. And I'm succeeding. I feel like I should be rewarded for that. I should get better stuff, not useless stuff. I suppose maybe they don't want you, I suppose it could almost be like a self-balancing thing, because if you're already finding the game too easy, then they don't want to give you more powerful weapons yet, and so you have to wait to get those. But that was very frustrating. And I was on a mission where just like a big mech came down and I had this like, really long drawn out battle with it. All it had was armor and I had an anti-armor weapon, but, it just took a very long time to whittle it down. And then I got past that and did a bit more on the mission, hoping the mission would end soon. And then the next fight was like one of those plus 3 heavies and a boss and like a whole horde of enemies. And I was like, oh fuck. And just like left the game for a while and came back to it the next day. And then I quit that mission completely. I just went to a different part of the world. And I was kind of thinking like, oh, the game's kind of broken for me and it's, losing interest in it. But then I went and did some side quests that were kind of I had a couple that were roughly my level and I did those. And then I started doing some even lower level ones that were just left in my backlog just to get good enough that I would be able to take on these other things. And of course, along the way, even if you don't find good weapons in that lower level content, you'll just, by visiting shops regularly, you'll see some stuff for sale that's like, oh shit, that's actually amazing. And I found a shield. I'd been going for like low capacity, fast recharge shields. That's one area where you can just look at the numbers and know how a shield works. And that's really cool. There's a really interesting trade-off between how much do I care about how quickly my shield comes back? How long do I have to take cover before I get my shield back? And how big is the shield? And they just keep making those numbers more and more extreme. You think, like, I thought, okay, I just like fast shields and as big capacity as possible, obviously, but most of the fast ones are small capacity. And I was using that and I was getting destroyed in this high level mission. And the biggest thing that made the difference was not actually leveling up. It was, I found a shield that was like, my old one was 200 and this was like 450 and much slower to recharge, but I was like, you know what? That is so tough. I don't think it matters. And then I got that and then I got a class mod. And class mods give you like some free points and a certain power. I really like the way they do these because they do a lot of things that most games don't do where it can give you points in an ability that you're not high enough level to have yet. Like there's no way you could have this ability. It's like a level 25 ability and this mod just gives you 3 points in that and you just get them. It just works. That's crazy. Like, most RPGs won't let you do that. And then even more amazingly, I'm really surprised they do this, but I remember it now from Borderlands 2. If there's a skill that's like, oh, this one increases the damage of all your weapons when you're at close range. And the first point of it will do 12% extra damage. The next one will do 24. And there are 3 possible points you can put in this. And so at the point 3, you're doing 36% extra damage at point blank range. If you find a class mod that has +3 to that ability, it just stacks. It just adds onto it. It just goes beyond the 3 maximum. Like now you just have 6 of that. We said 36 for that. Okay, fine. You got 72% damage now. Like what? And so for every skill, I don't know. I'm really curious actually if there are any skills where they just, can't put them on a class mod because any skill that can be boosted by a class mod can go beyond its maximum. And these maximums, when you read them, they're not like restrictive. They seem pretty sensible. They're like, okay, yeah, you don't want me to be able to regenerate. I'm already regenerating like, the class mod I found gives me +3 to a thing called mindfulness, which is,
that doesn't seem like a Borderlandsy kind of stat.
So Samara's kind of like there's a little bit of a spiritual kind of element to her abilities. There's kind of like, do you want to go into aggression or like, focus, that kind of thing. And mindfulness means that when you take damage, it gives you a stack of mindfulness, and mindfulness reduces the recharge delay on your shield. And so I've just got this high capacity shield with a slow delay. But now I've got a class mod that gives me +3 mindfulness. And so when I take damage, it's dramatically reducing the delay. And so I think I'm getting like 20% quicker delay, but that's without me putting any actual points into mindfulness. So now I'm expecting my whole character to put more points in that tree so I can unlock mindfulness for real because it's above my current level. But once I get mindfulness, I'm going to be so fucking mindful. Like I'm going to max it out organically and then also have a class mod that boosts it to 3 and then just get the slowest ass shield with like, I have one now that's like 900 shield and like 7-second delay. But like, I'm so mindful. I will get that back.
This is the most video game story you've told in the pod for a while, I think, Tom. You've taken the ancient art of meditation and then use it to regenerate your shields at unlikely speed is good video games.
I feel it's important in life to be present in the moment to regenerate your shields really quickly.
That's very good. Well, I'm going to give it a try now. You've convinced me. So all I've heard has been just kind of pretty negative stuff about it. Like, people have been saying like, obviously it's very grindy, that's fine. But, people have been disappointed with the level design, quite flat and uninteresting, but I'm not sure. I
haven't had that. I actually have, I was quite surprised, like, you're just flying around the galaxy in this one, and so you're just going to different planets. You're not stuck on Pandora. And I've just been to like a sort of, neon noir city kind of planet. And then we went straight from there to like a sort of temple monkey kind of planet.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, monk planet, not monkey.
Oh.
Now I've just got to a swamp planet with monkeys. So there's that too. But it's got that feeling of like, that sort of, like Star Trek kind of feeling of like, this week we're on this planet and it's got its own theme, and they're really like, the swamp planet I've got to is surprisingly vertical. There's all these like vines and trees, got mountains that you're driving on, and, yeah, it seems really cool.
I think Borderlands 2, like, it became a series where it's a great place for friends to hang out because it's not too tasking really. It's just swapping loot and thinking about stuff. And that's, you know, there aren't a huge number of games like that. Vermintide's good for that. But it's still a genre that, you know, has its fans.
The thing I was going to say about when I was stuck and I went and got, all that stuff that eventually made me better. When I came back to go back to that boss, I had to fight through that. You don't have to repeat any mission objectives, but you have to go through the area. Like the starting point of that mission is still the same. So I have to fight past whoever has respawned.
The ambient mechs.
Yeah, it's got that kind of Diablo thing of like a zone is a zone, and when you spawn into it, those will be the enemies who are there. But on the way back through it, I found a mission that I didn't see before, and I took that mission, and that threaded throughout the whole zone in its own way, and so I ended up basically having a whole new mission in the same location with new enemies, the respawned versions of the same enemies, but now I've got new equipment, so fighting them is different, and my objectives are different, and going to different parts of the map, and it's surprisingly effective. And it almost feels like maybe that's why they don't have that kind of VR sim kind of thing, is that they kind of want you to just replay a zone. Right. Just like, do that same thing again, but see how it works with these weapons.
Tempting now. That might be my Christmas game. I like to grind a game over Christmas and sort of chill out.
Yeah.
I've played too much Diablo 3 now, the game's dead to me. It's not though, is it, Tom? If you think about it, I'll be playing it within 6 months.
Do you regret not playing it on PC? It is on PC. Why are you playing on PlayStation, just out of interest?
Partly because I was ill, and so I was on my couch a lot, and I just wanted to like vegetate and play something. And then also, I'd heard there were performance issues, and I figured console would be a safer bet for that. Like, it's just easier to optimize for console, and so even if they haven't yet, like the patches will be more forthcoming than like a PC. My PC is not super high spec. I don't really know where it falls on the spectrum these days, but stuff that has performance problems on PC scares me.
That was the other bit of news, wasn't it? That PlayStation 5 has been announced.
That's true.
Yeah.
There's all sorts of haptic, funny business in the controllers.
Yeah, it's weird. They seem to be saying that Rumble isn't haptic now, but it is, isn't it? I thought Rumble was. I thought it was the very definition of it, but they seem to be anyway. They seem to be rebranding this as haptic rather than Rumble, despite the fact that Rumble is obviously haptic feedback.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the only thing that's been announced as being the controller, which is, I suppose, will eventually be compatible with PC. So I suppose that's relevant.
Yeah, and those games can choose the resistance of the triggers, which is an idea I really like, actually, because the example they use, like pulling a bow should be harder than, aiming down your sights. Yeah.
I don't know what the release of a new console really means to the PC landscape now, though. I suppose it depends whether it's streaming or not, or whether it's...
It sounds like the next generation is going to be fairly conventional, and then streaming is kind of on the horizon. I bet everyone's just watching Stadia and seeing what really happens with that technology. But it sounds like it's going to be lots of downloadable games, and I think they'll still have disc slots and stuff for physical retail. So it doesn't feel like it's going to be a very, tumultuous shift from what people already expect. They'll just be more powerful machines. It'd be interesting to see if they adopt like ray tracing and a lot of the stuff that's been gimmicky in the PC space for the last year or so.
Yeah, I think they said there is ray tracing hardware.
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting.
They're doing more with VR again as well, I think.
They persist.
Yes,
with VR.
Well, PlayStation VR, I haven't tried it, but it sounded like that was one of the more kind of worthwhile versions where it's just a thing you buy, you just put it in your head and it works. And it's comfortable and light.
Yeah. I think that's the way, my sweet spot is still the Oculus, actually. A sit-down VR headset lets me play Flight Sim or Elite. That's, as a kind of niche hobbyist, that's what I want and pay a lot of money for.
Until they can stop my face sweating disgustingly, I think.
And also just wearing glasses with these things is still a nightmare, really. It still doesn't work, and they're still too heavy. There's loads but don't at me, VR. This happens every time. I don't know why.
I noticed actually that the Valve Index Complete Kit, the 900 quid one, is top of the Steam charts currently.
Oh, wow.
So it has been, I've checked it a few times, it's always been in there. So people are buying that. Or, I mean, that Steam chart is by revenue, so maybe 10 people bought it, and that's enough to compete.
On the topic of next-gen consoles, everyone should check out the images going around of the PlayStation 5 prototype console.
Oh yeah.
Which is absolutely absurd, if true. Absurd if true. But the final console will never look like that, but it looks like a kind of part of an aeroplane turbine. It's
I thought it looked like, is it Nexus Corp building out a Blade Runner?
Right, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's got that vibe to it.
It's got a sort of like a ridged pyramidal kind of thing going on.
Yeah. And a landing zone, and there's kind of like shallow depression where a helicopter might, not a helicopter, whatever Blade Runner's version of that is, would land. It looks like it needs a lot of cooling because there are slots all over that thing, and that's obviously their temporary cooling solution. But yeah, we'll see. It's interesting. Yeah, so I don't know, like how, I keep saying this, but like, I don't know how much, I don't need more graphics.
Yeah.
I really don't. Like, God of War looks fucking amazing to me. Like, that looks marvellous. And like, if games look like that, the big budget games, and The Last of Us 2 and stuff like that, and even remastered versions of, The Last of Us 1 looked fucking amazing. The remastered version of Shadow of the Colossus looks fucking amazing. I don't need more graphics anymore.
Well, the fact that you stayed with Tom Francis have stayed with a consistent spec for long enough that you don't remember how good your PC is really telling. It's just not that important.
Yeah, that did not used to be the case. You couldn't not know how your PC fared in the grand scheme of things, which is, I almost wonder if that's related to the fact that recently we have had a few fuck ups on that front in terms of like Control and Borderlands 3 both had sort of rocky launches in terms of performance on PC, and elsewhere actually. Both of them have problems on console as well, but, I wonder if it's a case of like, it's been easy to make PC games for a while in terms of, performance, and now you don't have to optimize as much.
Yeah, you certainly don't have to compress your textures anymore. The new Call of Duty is 175 gigabyte download.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, it's most of my SSD.
Red Dead 2 is 150 as well.
Yeah.
Which apparently is 50 gigabytes more than it was on consoles, which is cool, I guess.
Red Dead's coming out on PC.
Oh yeah. Was that news? I think, was that news last week? I can't remember. It was exciting anyway.
Yeah, it's cool. It's the slow, strange cowboy game is coming to PC.
Yeah, I think I probably will play that now that, Rockstar's, various, malfeasance regarding its workforce has fallen into distant memory.
Yeah.
I feel I can play a game by them again.
Not too soon.
No. Yeah.
It's a nice game, good horses.
Good horses. I've been upgrading a PC. Ooh. That's been the majority of my gaming time for what feels like for fucking ever.
So by building a PC, have you gone into the PC mines and grabbed individual components and then bolted and soldered them together at home like a true PC gaming warrior, or have you gotten someone else to just build it for you, like a sensible person might?
Did you pay the silicon price or the gold price?
Well, I did pay somebody to build it for me, but I also did it in the least sensible way, in that I still had to do a reasonable, a minimal amount of customization for it, because I've been moving country a lot, and I've not wanted to reinstall Windows, because reinstalling Windows, the last time I did it, it took maybe 6 months before I felt like it was working properly with all my peripherals. Because I have like an old Wacom tablet, and the interfacing between Windows Ink, which is obviously the new Real Player in terms of being the worst possible piece of fucking hardware software ever devised, and the interaction between that, Wacom's own legacy drivers and Photoshop's drivers, completely fucking nightmarish. And on the top of that, you've got all of the normal Windows 10 bullshit adverts, Cortana, all this other hand-holding stuff, which is actually just getting in the way of you using your PC like a normal human being should. And so I was so scared of reinstalling Windows. And obviously I didn't want to reinstall all of the software that I have accrued. So what I was doing was when I moved from Sweden to America, I bought the exact same PC in America and took my hard drives over and plugged them into it.
Nice.
And it worked fine. And I couldn't do the same thing now because some of the components just aren't available to purchase anymore. So I've had to respec basically, and it still works. Like the Windows install, even though it's obviously very inadvisable to stick a Windows install which expects different hardware into a new set of hardware, it works. It does adapt. But by fucking Christ, is it painful to get to that point even? And I was going to talk about this for ages earlier. I was standing around my house just ranting and swearing like a maniac, obviously.
You had your own little podcast.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'll keep that private. But suffice to say, I think something that's lacking from all hardware coverage on, say, PC Gamer or Rock Paper Shotgun is an article which says, okay, so you're willing to build computers, but the last time you did it was 4 years ago. Here's the things that you need to know now that are going to catch you out. Because it's just impossible for somebody to remember on that timescale. Like, it's not a frequent enough occurrence that I'm going to embed these things in memory. Some things last, but I'm going to make mistakes. dumb mistakes as well. Like I knew I had a secondary monitor here, in a cupboard, and I thought that'll be fine. It was actually way older than I thought it was. Doesn't have HDMI.
Yeah.
But also, it didn't occur to me that DVI would be a phased out standard now, because it wasn't on the last generation of GeForce cards that I bought.
Right.
But nobody sent me the fucking memo. But the thing that catches you out, I mean, obviously you're going to make mistakes yourself, but the thing there's always something that's just completely out of your context to explain that has changed with PCs in that time. There's no way you couldn't even begin to ask the question about what the thing is, because you just don't know. Like, so I have all these hard drives. So I'm like, oh, brilliant, got my PC. I'm just going to plug them in like I did. I bought the same case twice, and this one is, it looks the same, but it has a slightly different, so it's called like a fractal design Define S rather than Define R6. The last two have been the same, except that in the second R6 I bought, they completely encased the power supply in a shell. I don't know why. It makes it really difficult to access. Have no idea. Don't bother to tell me. I don't care why. That's not the case with this one, but because it is a slightly different model, I opened it up and I was like, there are no hard drive bays. There's literally just an empty space where the hard drive bays are meant to go. What the fuck? And it slowly occurred to me that this is a case that has been specified specifically, for people who are going to do hoopy water cooling stuff. And so they've taken out all the hard drive bays and replaced it with empty space where you can put a giant fucking pump. I don't have a pump. I'm not water cooling. Instead, the hard drives are now stacked on their side around the back of the case. Like, sometime recently they've started slipping SSDs around the back of your motherboard. And they've done this with all of the 3.5 inch drives as well.
Whoa.
And it turns out that it's really fucking dumb. I said I wouldn't rant about it.
I'm enjoying it. It's good.
This is the abridged version.
Yeah. But like, okay. So you've got a pump. You need to make space for your fucking pump, twat. So where do you put the hard drives? You've got to put them around the back. I understand that. But you power the hard drives with this very thin, flat, wide cable from the power supply. It looks like a piece of linguine. It's really, really wide, really, really flat, very unflexible. You can only flex it really in one direction because it's flat and wide. You can't flex it horizontally.
Not twist that thing.
You can't fucking do that.
No.
And so if you're trying to, like, I have 4 hard drives in that thing that I need. And getting this cable to just fit in this less than 2 centimeter space between that and the PC case.
Yeah.
It's insane. Nobody would design a case like this apart from those pillocks, apparently. But like, obviously it's my fault because I didn't look that closely at it. Nowhere did it say, oh, this is the case particularly for bellends. If you're a bellend, buy this case. I didn't think to interrogate it because it never occurred to me anybody would do something this stupid because it doesn't work. I mean, I've got it fixed together. I don't know if I'm going to be able to put the actual side on the case.
So is there just like a big empty space in the case?
Yeah, just a giant void.
I've, my SSD, I got so frustrated with trying to change the size of the bay. All the bays were designed for 3.5 inch standard hard drives. It's just fucking dangling. It's just dangling in there.
It doesn't matter with an SSD.
It doesn't matter. It's fine because it's self-contained. Like it's not conducting anything. Like it's made of plastic, and so it's just fucking loose in there, doing what it wants, and it's fine. It's okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm dunking on Fractal Design here, but the reason I went with their case is because the first Fractal Design case I bought from them was the best case I've ever owned. It was like the perfect case. The way that you loaded the drive bays was really, really easy. Just things popped in and out. You didn't really need to use screws. It was just so ergonomic. I was like, oh man, we've learned something. We've learned something as a species, and yet no. Anyway, as a result of finally getting a PC working again, I have been playing John Wick Hex.
John Wick Hex?
John Wick Hex
from
by
Mike Bithell.
Yes, you may know from the television and BAFTAs and things.
Yes.
Famous man. And he's made an interesting game. I think it's do you guys like John Wick?
I've sort of.
I'm the same. I've seen the first 2, and I think if I didn't if no one had recommended them to me, I'd be like, oh, that was actually like a pretty superior action film. But because people have recommended them so much, I'm like, really? Are you wild about this? One thing I do like about them is the whole hotel mythos thing, like the weird undergoes. Oh, you heard that.
I don't like the world in which John Wick takes place. I think I don't find it that charming. I find it's just obviously cartoonish in a way, which doesn't satisfy me. Like sometimes big cartoonish, like heavy-handed, everybody's an assassin. That's fine on some level, but for some reason it really annoys me in this. I don't know why.
It's weird.
But the thing that I don't like it as an action film. They're fine, but everything about, so there's one particular shot, I can't remember in which film it is, but don't worry because they're identical. There's one particular shot, it's like an overhead shot. John Wick's in the center of the screen. He's in a nightclub or possibly some archaeological ruins, or who really cares? It doesn't matter.
I think it's both in two.
Yes, that's right. But space doesn't matter in those films, which is one of the things that I hate about it. And he's just in the center of the screen, and men are running into camera, then pulling their guns as they're like a meter away from him.
Of course.
And then getting shot dead before they can shoot him.
Yeah.
And it just makes no sense. And it goes on for like 5 seconds, and he kills like 10 people. And they're all just running onto screen so they can shoot him at a meter's range rather than shooting him from wherever they were.
They're Call of Duty NPCs, basically. They sort of spawn out there and just get beaten up. And
I think for some people like that, it's balletic or whatever. I mean, I think it's all about the style of it rather than any kind of, like, in as much as I find like gunfights dramatic or interesting in cinema, it's the things that I find fascinating about them. It's all about the positioning. It's all about sight lines and space and the deadly impact of those of weaponry. And John Wick doesn't really have those two first things. It's just a man spinning around, pressing a button, and then lots of people fall over. And for better or for worse, like John Wick Hex reproduces that. And I think it's one of the most kind of weirdly, brilliantly faithful in some ways adaptations of a piece of film, because it really expresses, for me at least, the action in John Wick. And in saying so, it also expresses the ways in which I find that action insufficient for me dramatically. But so there's some John Wick story going on, who cares? But you're fighting through these tiny, tiny levels. Each one is only like 2 corridors sometimes. Maybe it's like 3 rooms. And it is turn-based sort of, but it's sort of like super hot-ish in that it freezes time, and then you make your decision about what your next move is, and then time for everybody moves simultaneously. And it expresses what you're doing at the top in terms of like a time bar. So almost like a piece of video editing software. You see how long your action is going to take expressed across seconds, and you can see how long enemies' actions are going to take expressed across seconds. So you can see when, this enemy's going to shoot me in 0.5 of a second's time. Maybe I can throw my gun at him in less time and stun him, and then I can close the gap between him and slam him into the ground and kill him. And I think that's very interesting in and of itself. That's just a novel kind of mechanic. But also I think it does a very good job of expressing the kind of combat that happens in John Wick, where people are just popping out basically of every fucking orifice in this building. There's lots of spawn points in this game. You walk past a door and like it doesn't matter that you've cleared that level before it, somebody's going to pop out of that door. Like Super Hot actually is quite a close analogous game. And you just have to it's almost like Robotron, all these things are coming towards you, and you've just got to work out how to manipulate yourself through the small number of herbs at your disposal to try and avoid being hit and get out of sight lines, whilst taking people down. I don't know what the longevity of this game will be for me. I feel like I've seen most of its verbiage in quite a short period of time.
How far in are you?
I think I'm like 3 missions in, not like 3 individual set pieces. Like, I think it's like, it would be fair to describe it in cinematic language like scenes.
Yeah.
I'm in 3 chapters in, let's say.
Right.
And not that many new things have progressed. You can kind of pick up perks along the way which alter your skills, and you can pick up new weapons, but everything is basically comes down to playing that timeline, and it's all about just, so of the verbs that you have at your disposal when you target an enemy, you've got strike, you've got push, you've got take down, shoot, and throw gun. And none of those feel that different or interesting to me. Obviously, shooting somebody is different to taking them down physically. But the real thing that differentiates them, rather than it being about the spatial considerations, is just how much time it takes versus how much damage you're doing to them. Obviously, if you can shoot somebody dead, that's pretty good. That's uber stunning somebody, then nobody gets up from that.
The ultimate stun.
The ultimate stun. But if you strike somebody, it might only knock off 2 bits of health, and then they may recover.
I've found that the balance of this is strange.
Yeah.
So I've only played, I haven't even finished the first chapter, but I'm sort of 5 scenes in, I guess. This is not a complaint coming from me, but throwing your gun is both faster and more accurate than shooting anybody. So I've just been throwing my gun in almost every situation. What happens very often is like, you're in a non-hostile situation, you move somewhere, and then as soon as you get line of sight to an enemy that you didn't know was there before, the game stops right there, and gives you an opportunity to decide what to do. If that person is coming straight at you, they've seen you and they're already planning to shoot you. And when you mouse over the shoot option, you'll see on the timeline there's kind of this prep time and then there's this execute time, in pink. And so you can see the point at which they will fire their gun, you can see the point at which you will fire your gun if you choose the shoot option. And in general, it seems to me it's usually a bit after them. So they're going to get a shot off before you kill them. And so even if you have a 100% chance to hit, the shoot option is often not good enough, if they've come in ready for you. But the throw gun option is slightly less time. And so like, well, I could either get shot or I could not get shot by throwing my gun at them. And so I always end up throwing my gun. And then if you, I was in a situation where like all the way across a restaurant, someone came at me and I had an 80% chance to shoot them. I actually did have time in this case. I think they weren't even armed. They were like a brawler who was just going to come at me with their fists. But it was like 80% chance to shoot or 100% chance to throw my gun at them. Really? I'm like throwing my gun is both faster and more accurate than just shooting them with the gun I'm holding and pointing at them right now. Like,
it doesn't kill them,
the trigger. Right? No, but it stuns them for so long that I can cross the distance and take them out before they can never do anything again. So it's a death sentence unless there's someone else around, in which case obviously that's a much bigger problem.
There's interesting stuff going on with the things it restricts. So there is a sort of a resource called focus, which you expend on doing physical takedowns and also
forward rolls.
Rolling. Yes,
take a lot of focus to do that.
Yeah, it's not quite clear why that takes focus, but I suppose it would be overpowered otherwise. You just roll everywhere.
Yep.
It's super hard to hit when you're rolling. And you can sort of do this little, shaking your head to kind of regain focus. But it takes a little bit of time, so you can't do it in the middle of a fight. And if you get interrupted, then you're still losing focus.
How many seconds does it take to shake your head?
Very few. It takes a long time to bandage yourself, though, which is the other resource. Bandages. Each chapter is divided into scenes, and the number of bandages and ammunition is persistent across that. So you can't fritter away your bandages. You need to think about when you're going to heal yourself. And there's obviously reloading as well. That's the other time-taking thing. But I don't know that there's that much kind of meta stuff going on. It feels like everything is very tactical and immediate, but there's not that much kind of strategy to it, even within a single level.
I noticed like it hasn't really come into play as far as I play, but all the resources are persistent. I guess like maybe this is just only across a chapter.
Yeah.
But like from scene to scene, if you ran out of ammo on the last scene, you start the next scene with no ammo.
Yes. Yeah. And if you fail, you can restart from that beginning of that scene, but you still restart with that resource limit.
Right. And so that's like, I guess the reason that throwing guns is so good is that, they need some reason to do it other than shooting people. Yeah. But also, what I expected was like, I would be running out of ammo all the time and I was just like, fuck, this gun's out. I mean, usually you're throwing a gun at somebody because it's out of ammo. Or it's Borderlands where one of the manufacturers, that's how you reload is to throw a gun at somebody and then it spawns a new gun in your head. But I haven't been running out of ammo as much, but I want to know how the ammo mechanics work. And, obviously the mechanics of this game, I'm sure, were designed with the intent that if you follow these rules and you optimize within them, you will end up doing John Wicky things. And the scene that plays out will be a John Wick kind of scene. The scene that played out in my first level was after I killed somebody, I walked over to them and I wanted to pick up their gun. So I'm like, I've got my gun, but I also want their gun. So I tried to pick that up. Okay, picked it up, great. And then I saw in the tile next to me, there's another gun there, like a custom pistol. Oh, cool. That sounds good. Let's click on that. So you move to the next tile, you pick up that gun.
Yes.
And the next tile next to me had like this 9mm. Oh, I want that. Let's move over there, get that gun. And I realized you can only carry one gun at a time. And you drop your gun on like the next tile over.
Yeah.
I didn't even know things like, I thought I could only see these items when I got close to them. And so like 3 or 4 times I just picking up these guns. And then there's this feature. I think this is an ill-advised feature, but there's a feature to watch the whole thing back at the end of the mission, which in theory sounds great. That's the thing we all want from like super high density games where it's turn-based. Because in theory, what should play back now is this amazing, action sequence. Practice is me dropping a gun, picking up the gun, dropping a gun. Ooh, a gun. Ooh, oh, I dropped a gun.
That's right.
Oh, a gun.
Well, even if you play it not like an idiot, it still does, it looks awful though, those playbacks. The animation just isn't there to kind of do it justice. But it is interesting how that could even be used as a sort of previs tool for fights in an actual John Wick film.
The other thing it showed me, even when I did play, once I got the hang of things and I knew what the rules were at least, my most climactic fight so far, the one that warns you is going to be, this is going to be a big, tough fight. In the replay, you could just watch John Wick walk behind like a tea trolley and then crouch and then just wait. Yeah. Every single person has to come around the tea trolley because you cannot shoot through the tea trolley or
that. Yeah, this is what I was going to say is that, I mean, you might find as the number of enemies increase later that throwing your gun is generally inadvisable because unless you're really obviously just out of bullets, but, you're often surrounded by people and they, maybe 4 people might even have like a shot on you and you need to then kind of dive out of the way and around scenery. I find it very difficult to read what's going to be occluded in the environment. I find that very difficult. But also, it does break down into a little bit of kind of Benny Hill stuff or, you know, the corridor of death thing where you just back around a corner, you've got a full clip, pom, 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 pom.
And then when they drop their weapons right next to you, so you can get that really easily as well.
Yeah. There are bosses as well. And bosses, for some reason, you can't hit. With good bullets because they're too fast.
Wow.
They got too much focus. So you need to bring down their focus by body slamming them. So basically you need to close the distance, make melee attacks, and then for some reason they're more vulnerable to bullets. I find those a bit of a slog because often ordinary enemies are spawning continuously as well. So, I've died a few times through one of the bosses. It just felt a bit tedious really, because the only way to defeat him is to do something that feels quite un-Wiccan, which is just sort of like twatting behind little bits of scenery and then scurrying round and round and round and trying to, you know, bop him in the back of the head and then scurrying off again. And that's not John Wick's thing, really.
It sounds like this system would be a better fit for something like Leon. Where there's much more environmental intrigue and there's kind of stealth element and you can pop out and assassinate certain characters and then vanish. And you could probably, this system seems like it would authentically replicate a Leon assassination better than it would a John Wick fight, which might be, maybe the ideal John Wick thing is just, a third person shooter like Max Payne, but with loads of quick time, close combat moves. And you chain them together, score attack style, and just sort of create a sort of flowing sequence of gun fu and long range combat.
I don't know. I think this is a pretty good facsimile of it when it works. Like, it really does feel good when you've outwitted people. It only feels good when it's in your favor though, right? It's one of those games which immediately becomes unlike John Wick the second you fail. And the failure isn't necessarily on you, it's on the random dice rolls sometimes.
Right.
Like, you have to rely on moving, making you a more difficult target. And sometimes the percentages just don't go in your favor and you get hit. And it just feels kind of crappy then, because then you have a whole bunch of things that you need to do to recover, which take you out of combat in a way which doesn't feel like it satisfies the fantasy. But when it works and everything's going in your favor and you're rolling next to somebody and shooting the guy on the stairs and then you body slam this other guy and then you push this dude into down a stairwell and then, it feels really good when everything's flowing one thing after the other and you're succeeding at everything, because that's what the films look like.
Is it like, it's such a lethal combat that like, John Wick combat in the films is just highly lethal and highly accurate.
Yeah.
Whereas if, like, people watched the entire Matrix trilogy again recently, and those gunfights rely on everyone being incredibly inaccurate, which is probably how guns really are, to be honest. Like, missing, at ranges that ought to be extraordinary. But the fun is the bullet hitting a piece of concrete and that flying off in slow motion as someone runs through it. And I feel like that's the Max Payne thing as well. Like, I love the particle effects of Max Payne for money, for example. So there's briefcases everywhere with money. If a bullet happens to go through one, you get this, really satisfying explosion of, it's like a 2D sprite that just pops out, I think. And, all this money fluttering up and then slowly floating down again. And that is a fantasy that video games realize very well. But I don't know how you create a sense of flow in a turn-based tactical context, that actually reflects that high lethality thing that isn't fucking Rainbow Six or something. Like I don't know. Odd.
Has some pretty stinking writing in it, but I don't know if it's stinking because it's bad writing or because it's exactly like John Wick's writing. I think it might just be a really good facsimile of John Wick's writing.
Yeah, totally.
But I'll see your calm the hell up and raise you. This is of a boss man. The uncaged bear decided to fight him. Of John Wick, it says. It's like it's a little bit of Dan Brown, the famous man, looked at the red cup. I think, but yeah, it's I appreciate the things it's doing. I do think it's interesting. I don't know if I'm going to play a huge amount more of it. I will play a bit more. But
there's a verb that I really want in the game that I don't have, which is you can only roll if you're already crouching, and crouching takes half a second, which feels like a very un-John Wickian thing. It's like, I gotta spend half a second just squatting now. Okay, here I am. Right, now I can do a forward roll. Like, what I want to do is just go from start, dive into a forward roll. Right. And that sort of, I feel like that kind of gameplay could be interesting, where this move both moves me in space and moves me into a new stance. And in this new stance, I have different options. Now, I mean, that is true in this game.
That might well be a later perk, actually. I mean, some of the perks do seem, like they alter your abilities in fairly significant ways. So it sounds plausible that might be something later in the game.
Yeah, it'd just be interesting to be like, I was in a situation where my problem was someone else was shooting me while I was about to take this guy down, and then, someone else came on the scene, and I realized that this takedown is going to take me too long. They're going to shoot me. And what I wanted to do was like, get them in kind of a human shield kind of position. And then from there would be a whole new set of verbs for when you're in that situation. And as you play the game, you kind of learn, I want to do the human shield thing, and that will be transition to like, as I push them, I can like vault off the back of them and get behind this car and just have a whole set of like, quite specific, verbs that would take you into different stances that would all have their own sets of options. On the subject of throwing guns, I have to shout out Borderlands, achievements in this, because the whole thing about like a type of gun where when it's out of ammo, you just throw it and then you get a new one. That was in Borderlands 2. In Borderlands 3, they've expanded it so that, almost all of the, like, interesting guns from that company, also, have some extra perk on how that works. So, like, there's one where, the sort of standard one is you throw the gun and it explodes. So the gun is basically a grenade. Then there's, like, grenade perks on the gun, so it can explode into a cluster bomb of other guns that also explode. And then there's one where, the latest one I've got is, when I throw the gun, this is like really rapid fire pistol, and so it's 12 shots in like less than a second, and then, when it's out of ammo, I throw it. When I throw it, it turns into a massive like red orb that says shoot me on it, and when I shoot that, I get a damage boost for my subsequent shots. So every time I throw my gun, I also shoot my gun. There's another one which I haven't tried this yet, but I've just seen it in a description. When you throw the gun continues to fire after you throw it. So it's just shooting all the time. There's one that I do have, which is a unique weapon. I think it's a perk unique to this weapon, which is when you throw it, the gun you threw becomes a turret and it latches onto a surface and then intelligently targets enemies. And it's like, gets critical hits and stuff. Like it'll go for the head. And then I've even seen it like, when an enemy gets near, it'll just get legs and just walk after it.
That's awesome.
Shall we do some questions from the questions?
Let us once again brave the questions.
Matt writes, Dear Date at the Dough Bar. Not so much a question. Well, you've sent it to the wrong email address there. But a recommendation. Yeah. He offers a recommendation. He just watched a great video called What Are Games Like for someone who doesn't play games by YouTuber Rasputin. The video is about Rasputin's unnamed wife playing games for the first time while he watches, deliberately not influencing or guiding her experience. He observes how much of the language of video games is assumed knowledge and what a barrier of entry it can be when someone isn't familiar with the supposed basic video game rules. One of his most interesting points is about how important causality is. He gives this example in The Last of Us, where a petrol station blows up and the player must turn down a side street. Rasputin's wife spots a gap between the buildings and the explosion and makes a beeline for it. The game prevents her from taking this route by having an infected attack and kill her, but this has no relation to the explosion, so she doesn't make the connection. She assumes she was too slow and needs to go faster, and so she repeats and repeats and repeats. And the game fails to properly teach that this is the wrong path. It's an aspect of game design that I've never thought about. Learning from your mistakes is great, but you have to understand what the mistake is first. Is there an example of a time you made a mistake in a game, but learned the wrong lesson from it? I do have an example of this.
Go ahead.
In fact, I think there's probably quite a large number of examples in various Call of Duty games, because they are obviously incredibly scripted games, but also incredibly brittle. Like, you just need to push slightly in the wrong direction and the entire thing comes to a fucking halt. I remember there's some kind of bit, I can't remember which one of those games it was, where you're in the jungle and you exit the jungle near a river and you need to get a boat. That's we need to get a boat is the kind of impetus. In fact, there's even maybe a mission statement on the screen saying, get in a boat! And there's a boat on the beach. But it's an inert piece of scenery. And if you go and try and get in that boat, you die continuously. And I kept
How do you die?
There's just people chasing after you, and I think you just take damage eventually. It's not like there's even people who are NPCs who are specifically shooting you. I think there's just a kind of increasing damage danger thing. And I kept on running towards this fucking boat. I'm like, why can't I push this out of the river? And it turned out there was just like a checkpoint further down the beach, not near a boat. So there was nothing there. It was empty. And you just go to that, and then it cuts to a cutscene.
For fuck's sake.
That's rubbish.
But that happens all the time in Call of Duty games. And I think we've sort of escaped that now to some extent, because that era of cinematic shooter is somewhat gone. I don't know, actually, but I have no idea. Actually, that's probably not true. I'm not going to play the new Call of Duty, so.
There's one in Call of Duty Black Ops, maybe Black Ops 2. I can't remember which of those I reviewed, but whichever one I reviewed, it was in that one, because
they are the greatest culprits.
Really pissed me off. Where you're running along like a steel walkway that's kind of along a cliff edge, and I run along it. I'm following some NPCs. They're ahead of me. They're my squad. And as I'm running along, just a rocket hits the walkway and insta-kills me with no warning. And I play this section like 3 times. I'm insta-killed. And eventually I figure out the game just expects that I would be further behind these people. And what's supposed to happen is, like, this is always going to happen at that point when they get there. You just have to be like 10 seconds behind them. This is supposed to happen in front of you and stop you. And it's supposed to be an obstacle in your path. Like, oh no, the bridge is out now, and I've got to figure out, like, oh, can I do a running jump and get across that way? And I'm too far ahead of that. I was just too close to the NPCs, and so I was just being repeatedly killed for being too fast, I guess.
Yeah, given that the game sets your max speed and understands your starting point in the sequence and where you could possibly get to, that seems like an absurd kind of error, really.
And that game, that and many, many other instances in that game just had that feeling of like, you just want to make a movie, just make the fucking movie.
Yeah,
right. You don't want me to play this.
Yeah, there's a bit where I think you're riding with a mujahideen, which is slightly alarming in the context of the current world.
Yeah.
In one of the Black Ops games, and you get on a horse on this giant open desert, and you can really only go in one line across this desert. If you go off in any other direction, it fucks up. So the entire thing just kind of grinds to a halt. I think my horse just fell halfway through the sand and then got stuck there.
I know that because like we were working on PCGamer.com together, and I used that screenshot for every news story about this game ever since.
Yeah. That was one of the real face kicking I gave that game. I seem to remember.
Deserved, I think. And in these games, there's constant tension between, am I supposed to hold out or am I supposed to push forward?
Yeah.
That constantly happens in those games. Am I supposed to just kill everyone? And they keep on popping out and like going to the same bit of cover. And you almost have to sort of read the meta design as like, oh, if they're just going to keep on coming out to those particular positions, this must be a sort of AI loop that's happening. Therefore I should push on, which is not how you should learn the lesson about where you're supposed to go next.
I mean, it's interesting that I mean, obviously there are lessons that non-gamers need to learn when they play games about the language of games and what to expect. But these things just as often trip up fairly seasoned gamers.
Yeah, right.
Especially, like there was a point in the Call of Duty games where they switched from the model of infinitely respawning enemies, which would stop respawning when you hit a sort of physical checkpoint, to a finite number of enemies. And I remember that distinction tripping a lot of people up because they didn't know what to expect or, and you can run through those games and just get between checkpoint to checkpoint to essentially cheat the game because then enemies don't spawn if you get to the next checkpoint.
Yeah, there was a disastrous, Black Ops 1 or 2 run, where one of the levels where it was just a YouTube video of the player just didn't shoot. Just walked forward from checkpoint to checkpoint, and everyone was just missing him. And all games have fakery like this. Like Half-Life 2 has stuff like this, where a program's dramatically miss you and set off an explosion that won't kill you. And games pull down damage numbers when you're close to death to give you this sense that you're really kind of striving and on the verge. And that fakery is great, but when it's done poorly, it's just really embarrassing. It's like all this money and all this time has gone into creating this facade that isn't even a challenge. It doesn't even creates a sense of excitement that it desperately wants to.
It's so funny how like this, anytime there's a cutscene or like a big villain shows up and does some like mega attack against me or something, I always just like sit back in my chair and relax. I'm like, I'm 100% safe here. As soon as the controller's out of my hands, I know for sure I'm fine. Yeah. Nothing bad will happen at all. I don't need to think about this at all. This is the safest I can be. And the scene is trying to tell me, this is the most danger this is the darkest hour. It's the worst thing that's ever happened. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. This is a holiday for me.
I think one of the kind of the most corrosive lessons that I learned from games is whenever there's an opportunity for the path of least resistance or there's a cheese I can exploit, because I find myself almost physically incapable of then engaging properly with the game systems rather than just cheesing it.
Yeah.
It does make the games then unenjoyable to play, but I still have to do it.
Path of least resistance, that's definitely everyone's leaning, I think.
It's not your fault. I mean, obviously, like, as game designers, are always trying to avoid this. But also, like, the game is asking you to optimize. That's what games do. Hey, here's the rules. Figure out the best route. And when you figure out the best route, like, okay, I've done it. Great. I enjoyed that challenge. And now here's my best route. Like, it shouldn't be on you to deviate from that. The game should be making you do that.
I was talking to Matt Castle, who's been doing a fairly long-running Let's Play series on Divinity 2. Because I finished Divinity 2 last year as well, so I was kind of swapping notes. And something I didn't realize, if you're playing on your own, there's a party system, and there's a lot of things about placement in the environment which make a big difference to how fights go. If you're elevated vertically or you surround enemies, it can be a lot more effective. But you almost never get the chance to do that in the single player game because your party just moves as one, and it's a real ball ache to kind of unhitch the party and move them round to, where you think an ambush is going to happen, so you get some kind of strategic advantage. And combat can be then engaged by one of the characters, but then not by the others. And so if you link them up again, the character who's not in combat might just run across the battlefield to join the others, and you'd be like, no! Yeah. So you need to be super careful about it. So I almost never did it, but apparently he loves doing this. And he loves it when, there's a big, enemy speech. Because the speech only engages one of the characters, and you can unhinge the rest of your party. And then you just stand like one of your characters behind each of the enemy combatants, and then as soon as combat starts, you just nobble them instantaneously. And he says that he does this every time we play through. I can see that. So Friends writes, Dear CNC, I've recently become utterly obsessed with the re-release of WoW Classic. I've been playing for a good month now. I'm nearly level 60. And I've formed a guild consisting of around 30 to 40 friends, family and colleagues with the aim of eventually progressing through all the endgame content. It's brilliant fun, and we're all really, really enjoying it. The only problem for me is that all the other games I usually play have completely fallen by the wayside. As someone who generally enjoys a wide variety of genres, and like everyone else has a Steam library full of impulse purchases just begging to be played, the experience of monogamous gaming is something I'd not really considered before. MMOs are probably the genre that encourages this behaviour the most, with a focus on long-term progression, huge persistent worlds, and social mechanics that encourage people to log in regularly and see their friends. But clearly such communities exist in other genres too. Many people only play Counter-Strike, Call of Duty, Fortnite, to the exclusion of virtually all other games. What are your experiences of gaming monogamy? Was there ever a game that you played to the exclusion of others, either on your own or as part of a community? And if so, how did you balance this with your interests in the wider gaming industry? Kind regards, friends.
It's worth pointing out that games are specifically designed to do this. So if you're Blizzard and you can create a thing that keeps players in your ecosystem and out of every other company's ecosystem, that is a really good thing. And for you, because you get to market stuff at them from your different products, or you just get to continuously monetize them without your competitors getting in on that money stream. This is like the idea of the service game, the idea of ever expanding games. All of this is designed to monopolize your time, so that you can extract money, but also stop you from engaging with competitors' products. I think it's an incredibly calculated and cynical way to design games. And it's effective. Because I've been playing fucking loads of Destiny. I'd say like, in my job, like, you have to be a generalist. You have to have like knowledge of, as much knowledge as possible of different areas. If you're commissioning stuff, you have to know enough to know who to go to find out who knows what they're talking about, and understand that they're not sort of bullshitting or wrong. But some games do capture you, and for me it's Destiny at the moment for sure. And that has certainly become like a social space, especially on like PlayStation Network, where you can just like drop into a group and you're all on mic. And I just do this all the time after come home from the pub, a couple of hours Destiny. It's I call it the lifestyle game. It's the game that becomes part of your spare time. Not in an insidious way. It's a fucking great game and it's really good. It's a really positive experience. But these games are designed to monopolize your time. I think that's a thing you have to think about when you're talking about that type of game. In terms of monogamers, I was going to mention actually, there are some players who just love one series and they've got no interest in gaming more widely. They just love what one particular game gives you. And this is true of a lot of Sims players. It's true of a lot of Football Manager players, where the gaming becomes an extension of a real world passion. But their passion isn't for gaming specifically. It's for this one particular fantasy that gaming helps them to realize. And so the fantasy of being a Football Manager with all the players and the ratings and everything, is all they want from gaming. And they're never it's not a gateway drug. It's just going to be that one game for them forever. And those communities are almost the hardest to access because they don't go and read gaming's websites. They don't go and they don't care about anything except this one game they play. And loads of FIFA players like that as well.
I feel like I probably do this as often as not with games. Like I'm playing Borderlands 3 right now and not playing anything else.
Just go all in, yeah.
I only played John Wick Hex, because, I knew you were going to be talking about Marsh and I wanted to, I was going to play it eventually, so I figured I'd play it now so I could chime in. But if it wasn't for that, I probably would have just stuck to Borderlands 3. And actually that's one of the reasons I like doing this podcast is it kind of pushes me to play something new each week. Cause it's kind of, we don't like to talk about the same game every week. But yeah, my natural tendency is just like, once a game gets its hooks into me, that engagement is both, strong and also kind of fragile. Like if I do switch to something else, I'll lose it. Like if I stop playing Borderlands 3 for a week, I'll probably never go back to it.
Yeah, right.
The hooks are, deep but temporary.
I always have this with CRPGs, like, Pillars, the Pillars series, games I should absolutely love. But again, I've got to play something else for a week or review something, and it's dead to me then after that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the typical kind of customer experience. Like, in this profession, you have to go and play other things all the time. But I think when you're reviewing something like that, you have to think about the person who doesn't have to crunch it out in 4 days. The person who just returns to it every Sunday morning and just enjoys that world and will just play that one thing for about 4 months. That's the kind of the real way people play games of that sort.
Yeah. I think, for a while I didn't have an obligation to play new games all the time. And I was also quite time poor in the time that I could contribute to games. So I found that the sort of onboarding process for new games would stop up like the entirety of the time I had to play a game. And then, I'd have maybe a week would pass and I'd come back to it and like, I have no idea how this game works anymore. And now I'm past the tutorial. It's awful. So actually having like a CRPG, like Divinity, which I could just come back to and I'd remember, I'd be able to pick up where I left off. And that did become sort of like a mono game for me because it was easy just to drop back into that.
I definitely played Assassin's Creed Odyssey to the exclusion of all else for a long time. And I finished the main game, but I have the Atlantis DLC and I do really want to play it. And I started it and it's gorgeous. And then Control came along and I played Control to the exclusion of all else for a while. And then I hit like a series of brick walls. You can sort of progress in various directions in Control, and both my main quest thing and the side quest thing that I want to do both became brick walls for me. One was like a boss fight that I can't do, and the other is just like a regular fight, but I'm coming out of an elevator where I don't have any cover I can get to. And both of them would just kick my ass so many times. And the way you restart in that game, it's not like just at the start of the fight. It'll set you back to the last fucking control point, which could be in some cases like 3 minutes traversal away. And that I persevered for a while and I was frustrated. I was angry at it, but I was still replaying, and there's enough I like about the game that I was determined to get somewhere with it. And then Metabrain stepped in and said, Tom, you have to stop this. You have to uninstall this game right now because you are having an extremely negative experience every single time consistently for like 2 days now.
Metabrain says, calm the hell up, Tom.
I used to get me one of those Metabrains, I think.
So Control killed Assassin's Creed, and then Borderlands 3 killed Control. And now I don't know if I'll go back to Assassin's Creed.
Travis writes, hello. Tom F. mentioned urban fantasy, which brought to mind the Dresden Files book series. These books came recommended by Patrick Rothfuss, a writer whose work I enjoy. I think none of these words mean anything to me. I read the first 2 books in the series, and they were completely horrible, tropeful disasters, he says. Have any of the podders read any further into the series? Does it get better? As it stands, I probably won't find out the answer myself. Thanks, Travis.
So I have not, but my friend Nina, shout out to Nina, did recommend these to me, and she did specifically say the first 2 are a bit rough. It gets a lot better from there. Yeah. To be honest, your critique of the first 2 sounds harsh enough. I don't know that that you will get on with the rest, but I haven't read them myself, so I can't say for sure.
Can you not just drop in on one of the later ones, or is there?
That's kind of my inclination.
Wikipedia.
Nina advised me not to do that, but I considered it because I'll do that with, started watching like Breaking Bad, like season 3 or something. Like, sure, I'll just tune into this and just see. It was like a whole season before I realized, oh, that's the guy from Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, it's the classic game thing. It was like, oh, it gets good at 20 hours in.
Oh, yeah. Which Final Fantasy was it? Where people were saying like, it was literally 130 hours or something. And people were like, no, it gets so good. I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah, it's like,
I'm not going to waste 130 hours of my life being miserable.
It was 13. About hour 40, you go to a more open world place and it's fine. It's just fine.
Are there any books where that's been you felt okay getting through the first few books in order to get to the good stuff?
No.
I guess that kind of happens more with crime writers and things where they're still finding their feet, and then the voice of the character comes through in maybe the 3rd or 4th book more consistently. But
the other ones I've read have been like stuff like Rebus, which I remember being quite good from the start, but I don't know when I picked it up really.
I haven't had that experience, but I have had. There's some series where I'll just read them because they're super readable. Like, I don't like them. I wouldn't recommend them. They just, I don't know, check some kind of box, or I just want to know what happens next.
Yeah.
And so there's I guess I'll begrudgingly give a shout out to the John Milton series. I can't even name any of the books in the series. They're that forgettable. They're extremely formulaic, and there's nothing interesting about them. It's just like a super cool British spy dude who's amazing at everything, and it's written in a very straightforward style, but it's just really addictive. And I read like 8 of the, I didn't even read them. I listened to an audiobook, and part of it was that the narrator was good. And so it's just one of those things where I can just have it on in the background and it'll just go. And as soon as one finished, there's another one because there's infinite of these books and they're all exactly the same. So you know exactly what you're getting. If you like the last one, you'll like the next one.
Yeah. I like trash books. So there's stuff like Altered Carbon, by the man who went on to write Crisis 2. Richard Morgan, that's his name. And has now been made into a Netflix,
have you seen
series.
It, Tom?
I have, yes.
It's the most male-gazy thing I think I've ever seen.
The fucking book is as well. I mean, it's an accurate translation of that. They had to change some things. So, in the book, it's the Jimi Hendrix Hotel instead of the sort of 1920s pastiche they do. But obviously, Jimi Hendrix estate would not have been too happy with, having his name associated visually with Netflix drama. But that was sort of just like, the book goes to super weird places, and the sequels get really bad and weird with women, because like it's about consciousness of being sleeved into different bodies and stuff which is actually a really good idea for a detective show. It's really good.
The weird thing about that is there's really lots of obvious gender stuff that could be talked about there. I don't feel like the show approach that in any kind of sensible way.
So, like, your true identity is like in your neck or something, isn't it?
Yeah, so it's called the stack, and it lives at the base of your brain.
Is there like a special term for when you kill someone?
It's like a true death, basically.
Okay.
And so if you shoot someone point blank in the back of, it's like an atrocity to do that.
Yeah.
It's
like Podding and Eve.
Like Podding and Eve, exactly, yeah. It's fine to shoot up their flesh body. It's relatively okay. Like, sure, there's some pain, but the rich ones will just get re-sleeved somewhere else and live on. But stack death is like a massive atrocity in the world.
It's like when someone shoots you in the sleeve in our world. It's like, ow, but
I mean,
okay.
What the fuck, dude? What a dick move, but it's fine. My life goes on. Yeah, but no. I don't know what my point was really. It's drag off.
Don't read those.
I know the first book's fun, but yeah.
Just go to me. I do have a practical recommendation for the reader. Also, a Nina recommendation. Hard Magic by, I want to say Larry Ray Correa. Which is also an urban fantasy thing. And it's very, I can't speak to the Dresden books. I haven't read them, but, Hard Magic is very like hard-boiled noir, in modern day, but there's magic, and the magic is very stylishly presented. There aren't like warlocks and wizards and elementalists and stuff. The main characters are heavy, and a heavy is just someone who can kind of control gravity in certain limited ways and just make himself like more dense or more, or increase the gravity or lower the gravity on himself. And I think a crackler is someone who can control electricity. And it has these very like, evocative names for each,
roll that name again, I would say.
You don't like that one? I like that one.
Fizzman.
Fizzman. Oh yeah, that's much better.
Zippy Jap. Zip Zap.
Electricity Jones.
Actually, it's a little bit Bioshock in that way. And the thing that both those things do is that like, sort of feels this world has been lived in for a while and people have come up with their own terminology for this stuff. It's not sort of coming in from D&D Central and here are your standard terms for the classes.
Yeah.
Mark writes, with the often bizarre, nonsensical game premises and plots, if you could ask one game protagonist a question about what the hell they're doing or why, who would it be? And what question would you ask? Many thanks for all the pods. Mark from Mank.
Well, now I kind of want to ask John Wick, A, why are you throwing so many guns? But also B, like, it really kills a lot of people in those movies, and that like really kills them. Because that's his signature thing. It's like
stack death. Yeah.
Where if like Person of Interest, TV series is all about like, the guy uses guns, but he tries to take people out non-lethally. He'll shoot them in the legs first and try and just like get them out of the equation as best he can.
He's right for the brain pan.
John Wick really just fucking in the chest and then in the head. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like the fact that your default in this game is to shoot people twice.
Yes.
Double tap them in the manner of an actual assassination, yeah.
He really seems committed to permanently killing them. It's not just about self-defense. They have to die. And yet there's hundreds of them. He can't know them all personally. So I guess my question would be like, have you considered the non-lethal options? There are taser guns available for short range.
I want to ask Gordon Freeman, like, do you really care about science? What
You've forgotten physics?
What was exactly your specialism?
What are you in this for? Like, is it curiosity? Is it just sort of carried along by the tides of fate? What do you really care about, Gordon?
That is a weird guy. Cause he has a history. Like there's, you can open his locker in Half-Life 1. He seems to have a life before this, and he's a physicist, and he works, he's had this job for a while. He's like, he does do physics at this place. And then one day, when it turns out there's enemies there, he just becomes combat expert. He never says another word in the rest of his life, but murders everything he meets.
I want to ask, Max Payne, you okay, hun? Are you, this monologue thing, this sort of talk, the voices, just go see, do you want to go see someone about it professionally? Just take care of yourself, man. It's cold out there in New York in this infinite winter.
I would ask the goose. What is your end objective? What is your long-term plan here?
I'd ask the goose.
Death to the West, said the goose. In the surprisingly only voiced line in the game.
I'd ask the goose, what D&D alignment are you? On the morality scale.
I feel like chaotic neutral.
Chaotic neutral is just literally nothing matters, isn't it? It's just chaos for the sake of it is the Joker.
Yeah. Obviously the obvious question to, Gordon Freeman is, why haven't you joined a startup in Silicon Valley which chooses people's clothing for them? It's a deep cut for the Discord community. Talking of which, thanks to our Discord community for being awesome. You can find our Discord community, which is linked on our website, which is crateandcrowbar.com. crowbar@crowbar.com. That's all the questions we have time for. If you want to send us another question, you can send us a question at questions@creatingcrowbar.com. Or you can tweet us at creatingcrowbar. And you can listen to this podcast on youtube.com/creatingcrowbar. Thanks to Patreon. Patreon are cool. Well, maybe not the company, but the people who back us. That's patreon.com/creatingcrowbar, I guess.
Yep. Yeah.
And you can follow us individually on Twitter, a hateful platform full of shit. I'm Marsh Davis, MarshDavies.
Hi, Tom Senior. I'm at PCG Ludo LUDO.
I, Tom Francis, am at Pentadact, PENTADACT. I had to spell that name to someone on the phone today, and it took about 7 attempts, and I had to resort to a mixture of like the US military alphabet,
Panther, Alpha,
random words. N is the one that keeps tripping up because I keep wanting to say like
Piccolo,
night.
Echo.
If you say like N for night,
Yeah.
but there's also might. And N sounds like M, and
yeah.
so it's like you haven't helped anything. But there's also
Echo,
musty.
nasty.
Panther, Alpha, Nasty.
The Alpha.
My name is Pam. My
yeah.
name is just Pam.
Yes. Well, on that note, we say
Thanks for listening, everybody.